Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, at Falcoholic Kevin, here to bring you this week's Falcons vs. Saints Week 18 game preview as we have reached the end of the regular season, almost certainly the end of the full season for the Falcons, but it's technically still possible for the Falcons to make the playoffs if they were to defeat the Saints and the Bucs were to lose to the Panthers. Again, both of those things seem like dubious propositions at best, but can't completely rule it out. So there is a chance still for the Falcons to make the playoffs, but they have to win this game, and then they have to pray that the Panthers have the game of their season, beating the Bucs this week. Stranger things have happened in the NFL, but probably unlikely, to say the least. But guys, we will be breaking down this game here today. The Falcons getting a rematch against the Saints, opportunity to sweep New Orleans for the first time in recent memory. So Atlanta does have the chance to do that, and you'll never hear me arguing against beating the Saints. But this game does have some draft pick implications as well, not huge ones. And again, even if they lose this game, it also doesn't have huge implications either. So, it's one of those, maybe obviously you go for the win, you try to sweep your biggest rival and hope for the best there, but probably has the biggest implications for Arthur Smith and his potential to return in Atlanta in 2024. We'll get into all that stuff. We'll get into the injury report, the matchups, all that good stuff, guys, as well as pretty much everything you need to know about this game we will get into here in the next 20 to 30 minutes. But before we dive in, I want to bring you guys a quick word from our sponsors today. First of all, we've got BetOnline. Folks, the NFL playoffs are right around the corner, and the NBA season is in full swing. And who else but BetOnline has you covered with all the up-to-the-second odds, news, and scores that you need. With additional odds, lines, trends, and info on both desktop and mobile, you can access the world's best wagering information at any time. Whether you're wagering on the Falcons, don't recommend it. Whether you're wagering on the Saints, maybe slightly better depending on who you're picking, but if you're like me this week, and we're going to get to that on my prize picks, don't worry. I'm avoiding the Falcons. I'm off the Falcons now in terms of the betting. I'm finally going to take my own advice. We'll see if it pays off this week. But no matter what you're trying to do, guys, you can head to that website, betonline.ag, today to get in on the action and see all the most recent and updated odds. Just remember, when you sign up, to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. And like I said, guys, let's get into this week's prize picks. I've been teasing it for weeks that I was going to get off the Falcons, that you shouldn't bet on the Falcons and all this good stuff, right? Finally, taking my own advice this week, as we're going to go with no Falcons. However, we are picking a player in this game. So we do have, rooting interest. Unfortunately, that, I guess, technically would be against the Falcons, and this would, slightly. But I'm going to go with my guy, CJ Stroud, who I've really loved watching. And earlier in the year, had a tremendous game against Indianapolis, one of his best games of the season. And this number here for CJ Stroud, 257.5 passing yards. That's pretty much, that's like a below average game for him on the season. So getting a chance, going up against an opponent that he really cooked, and seeing an opponent that the Falcons actually cooked through the air, is kind of concerning. So I have a lot of faith in Stroud to go more than that 257.5 number. At the same time, he's going to be throwing it to somebody, right? And his favorite guy is Nico Collins, who now has even less competition for targets than he did when Tank Dell was healthy. So sad to see Tank Dell go out. But again, Nico Collins had a monster game against the Colts earlier in the season. That 72.5 receiving yards number for Collins is definitely an achievable number for him. He's typically going to get more than that most weeks. Both these guys are, a week or two removed from their respective injuries, so they should be firing on all cylinders. And this is a critical game for both, for Houston to potentially make the playoffs. So they're not going to be taking their foot off the gas at all. They've got to secure this win to have a shot here. So I think these guys are going to be dialing up an explosive game plan, and I like both of those guys against the Colts on Saturday. And then the one in the Falcons game, we're going to go with Chris Olave, who was the most reliable player that the Saints had, who put up over 100 yards against the Falcons before he left with injury. So that wasn't even a full game. For this one, he only needs to get more than 63.5 receiving yards, and I think he will do so. So that's the three picks we're going to have this week, guys. Stroud, Collins, and Chris Olave. the 3 picks. You can pick your own. You can pick mine, whatever you want. I've had a little bit of a mixed track record. It's my first season doing this, so, cut me some slack, but we've got some big dubs in there. But no matter what you want to do, guys, just take a look at Prize Picks. It is a skill-based daily fantasy game. You pick 2 to 6 players, decide if they'll go more or less than their Prize Picks projection. The more players you pick, the more you can win, all the way up to 25 times your money on any entry. And at Prize Picks, you aren't competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections. Prize Picks also has a very generous promotion schedule, including weekly promotions, Flex Friday, where you can get some free plays. Keep your eyes open for those reduced player numbers and things like that throughout the week as well. And it's not just the NFL. Once the NFL is over, you can do NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, for as long as that's going, college basketball as that starts to heat up here, soccer, esports, whatever you want, guys, they've got it and more. And the best part, Prize Picks entries can be made in 60 seconds or less if you know what you want, and they offer fast withdrawals. It's super easy. And guys, all first-time users that deposit and use our promo code DBB will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. So that means if you throw in $100, Prize Picks will match and give you another $100. If you throw in 50, Prize Picks will give you 50. Just remember to use our promo code DBB to let them know who sent you. Really helps us out. Appreciate that, guys. And also, since Prize Picks is daily fantasy, it's available in 31 states, Washington, D.C., and most of Canada. It's the best way to have action on the game in Georgia, Florida, Texas, among others. So definitely check it out. And thanks again to Prize Picks for sponsoring this week's episode. All right, folks. Let's dive into this matchup. First, taking a look at the injury report. I am recording this a little bit early on Wednesday since I'm going out of town. But looking at the Falcons so far, Atlanta does have some people not practicing. Two of those are rest related, excuse me. Calais Campbell and Cordell Patterson both had a rest day on Wednesday. But Drew Dahlman not practicing with the ankle injury he suffered towards the end of the Bears game, so he's definitely one to watch. Ryan Newsel replaced him and played well and typically has filled in pretty well when needed, but that's definitely one to monitor. DeMarco Hellams and Mike Hughes, both in the concussion protocol, did not practice on Wednesday, so they're definitely in question for this game as well. Notably, today on Wednesday, we did see linebacker Troy Anderson designated to return from IR, so he actually got in a limited practice coming off his pectoral injury. If you guys remember, Arthur Smith did say technically that they thought maybe Anderson would have a chance to play towards the very end of the season, particularly if the team was pushing for the playoffs. I don't really think this counts as pushing for the playoffs at this point, but, it's positive. I hope, even if Anderson just gets to practice a little, I don't know if he'll be active this week, but it's good to see him back on the field. Certainly. I'm happy to see him back out there. And then we also saw Zach Harrison limited with the knee injury from the Bears game, and Taylor Heineke limited with the ankle injury. Heineke, I don't know if he was pulled for injury at the end of the Bears game or pulled for performance. I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me. Doesn't matter who played. They were all awful, but those are the guys on the Falcons to monitor thus far this week. For the Saints, it's a pretty lengthy report as well. Saints have, I believe, 6 players not practicing today. Tight end Juwan Johnson, who had a very productive game last week, he did not participate with a chest injury. Safety Lonnie Johnson was out with a knee. Alvin Kamara, notably, was out with an ankle. Linebacker Nefi Sewell, he was out with a knee injury, and tackle Landon Young was out with a knee injury, which is, of course, a little bit dicey because the Saints are dealing with some depth issues at tackle. Defensive tackle Kalen Saunders also out with a concussion, so we'll see how he progresses throughout the week. And then there were 5 limited players. One of them was Jimmy Graham, just limited for rest, but we did see running back Kendre Miller limited with the ankle. Center Eric McCoy limited with a foot, wide receiver Chris Olave limited with an ankle injury, and then defensive end Peyton Turner limited with a toe injury. So he may potentially be coming back off IR. We'll see. But that he was returning to practice this week for that. So those are the guys to watch there. Obviously, the Saints dealing with a number of injuries. It's probably the Saints are up there with the Falcons. I mean, I would say even more so. In terms of most disappointing teams in the NFL this year. And, they're fairly beat up coming into this game, particularly on the offensive line. So it's not out of the question that the Falcons could sneak in a win here. But again, the Saints at home, typically a much better team than when they're on the road. They are healthy in terms of the passing game, assuming Chris Olave plays. Michael Thomas is out, but the rest of that group seems to be up and running. And we'll just have to see how the Falcons are able to handle it. But let's get right into those matchups here with the Falcons offense taking on the Saints defense. The last time these two teams played, the Falcons beat up the Saints on the ground, put up 228 yards. It was Atlanta's best rushing game of the season. They also had some decent plays through the air in that one. And the Falcons kind of thoroughly outplayed the Saints that week. It was nice to see. It was a fun game. It was a big bounce back coming off a bunch of losses going into the bye. Good to see the team play there. Since then, however, these two teams have basically continued to sputter. I would say the Saints have sputtered a little bit less than Atlanta. They're coming off a big win over the Bucs last week, where they basically blew the Bucs out for most of the game. Bucs scored a couple garbage time touchdowns to make it look a little better, but New Orleans controlled and dominated that game. The Saints do have a good, their run defense is pretty mediocre to bad, depending on the day, depending on who you ask. They are still, I believe they are 22nd in yards per carry allowed and 21st in total yardage allowed. So, keep that in mind. But against the pass, they've been significantly better. 8th in net yards per attempt allowed. They're also 9th in total passing yards allowed. So definitely a top 10 pass defense. And overall, they're also a top 6 scoring defense, 13th in total yardage allowed. So this is a good defense. They are vulnerable against the run, which is kind of how the Falcons beat them up last time. But they're far from invincible. And in the passing game, they're good, but, we'll see how much the Falcons even rely on the passing game at this stage, given how it looked last week. But basically, the Saints have great outside corner play. They've been, even with Marshawn Lattimore out, Paulson Adebo and Isaac Yiadom have filled in pretty well. Yiadom, maybe? Sorry if I messed that up. They have had some issues in the slot with Alontae Taylor, although he did have a good game last week against the Bucs and got, I believe, his first career interception. The pass rush has definitely been an issue for the Saints, where they've just not been able to get to the quarterback very well. They've definitely missed guys like David Onyemata, right? And guys like some other guys that they've lost over the last couple of seasons. And they haven't really gotten a ton from rookie Brian Brzee. He's been solid as a pass rusher, honestly, but he's struggled against the run a lot. And then, Tano Passigno is sort of a, middling, good, solid starter type. They do have good linebacker play. Obviously, Demario Davis, still one of the NFL's best. And then Pete Werner, a down year for him, it seems like. But definitely a guy that is still a capable player. And Tyrann Mathieu has been good. Again, not necessarily elite Tyrann Mathieu, but still a very solid player. Looks like they're going to be starting Jonathan Abram next to him, who's been a good run defender. He's always kind of been that, but elsewhere he's not so good. So we'll see how that pans out. But yeah, for the Falcons, again, it's just run the football. Run the football as much as you can. Beat up the Saints on the ground, try to control the clock, try to limit potential mistakes in the passing game. And get the ball to Drake London, get the ball to Kyle Pitts, and just, the Falcons offensive line should be able to handle this Saints front. The Saints front hasn't been very good, and the Falcons offensive line has actually been pretty good. McGarry, Storm Norton, both have been good in pass pro. McGarry, the better run blocker. Lindstrom's the number 1 guard in football. He's been great after a little bit of a slow start. Drew Dahlman, we'll see if he plays, but Ryan Newsel, honestly, to his credit, has filled in admirably, so I'm not too worried about that. Matthew Bergeron is definitely sort of stabilized. I wouldn't say he's had a tremendous rookie season, but he's had a solid one. I mean, that's kind of what you're mostly expecting from rookie offensive linemen, if they can kind of be solid. That's a pretty good return because you're expecting growth year over year. And Jake Matthews, again, slowing down a little bit as a run blocker, but still as reliable as ever as a pass blocker. And he's going to probably get the toughest matchups week in and week out, but I think he's done well in that area. So it really just comes down to who's playing quarterback. Can they get the ball to these guys, or are they going to throw 4 picks again? And can they run the ball at all? Can the running game get going? I think this is a spot where they did have a lot of success a couple of weeks ago, but this running game has been extremely inconsistent. I don't know who to trust. I don't know how the carries are going to be distributed. I don't know what they're going to do. This is one of those games where you'd think they would hammer the ground game, and they did it successfully earlier in the year, but this coaching staff doesn't seem to do the obvious thing or do the thing that I would think most teams would do. So we'll see how they elect to do things here. But moving on to the Saints offense versus the Falcons defense. This was a matchup that the Falcons definitely ended up winning by the time that game ended. But some of that had to do with Olave going out. He was the one guy in the Saints offense that was really getting going. Again, we'll have to monitor the health of some of these guys because Saints could be down to a third string or fourth string right tackle at this point, depending on if Landon Young can play or not. And the Saints offensive line has definitely been one of the bigger sore spots for this team. So we'll see, at this point, who ends up playing for the Saints. Will it be Trevor Penning coming in if Landon Young can't go? Will it be Nick Saldiveri? Will it be Cam Irving? I mean, I'm not exactly sure who would get the start there. I know Andres Pete has basically taken over at left tackle, but tough spot there for the Saints. At this stage, it looks like it's going to be, James Hurst at left guard. Eric McCoy at center has been very solid this year. I think he's having one of his best seasons, honestly, maybe his best ever. But the right side has struggled with Ryan Ramczyk out. I mean, Cesar Ruiz has not transitioned well to guard. He's definitely been a bust for the Saints through his first 4 seasons, no doubt. But yeah, without Ryan Ramczyk, that's arguably the Saints' best offensive lineman. So tough to be without him. We'll see if the Falcons could take advantage. They haven't really taken advantage of backup tackles at this point, given their edge pass rush woes. But, if Zach Harrison could play, we know he's been coming on. Maybe the Falcons could get a little bit more out of Lorenzo Carter, who's been playing better. Maybe Arnold Katie can have a game. We'll see. But yeah, on the interior, the Falcons definitely have the advantage once again. David Onyemata's playing great. Calais Campbell's playing great as well. The Falcons have typically done a good job there. It's just the edge pressure. And then the 2 linebackers are good. They did have their probably worst game as a duo last week against the Bears. We know that team is a unique offense and how, Justin Fields puts a lot of stress on your linebackers. But I have confidence in those 2 to get it done. I have confidence, obviously, in Jesse Bates. We'll see if DeMarco Helms can clear concussion protocol. Otherwise, it's going to be Richie Grant back at safety again. And we know his liability as a coverage safety. Again, Juwan Johnson potentially out for the Saints, so maybe it'll be Jimmy Graham getting the majority of the work. That would, of course, be interesting. But yeah, for the Falcons, it's really going to be, does Alvin Kamara play? Does Juwan Johnson play? Those are 2 big question marks. Chris Olave, he was limited. I don't think there's too much to worry about with his availability, but how healthy is he? And then, Rashid Shaheed in the slot. Is he going to have a big game, or can the Falcons shut him down? I don't think you have to worry too much about A.T. Perry. He hasn't really been very effective this year. So, can you put pressure on Carr? Can you stop the Saints' run game, whether Kamara plays or not? And can you slow down Chris Olave? A.J. Terrell had his worst game of the season last week against DJ Moore. He definitely had some struggles, against Chris Olave, but kind of everybody did, honestly. It seems like the Falcons have benched D'Alford for Mike Hughes, but Hughes is in the concussion protocol, so maybe we will see D'Alford get a chance to play, which I would appreciate. Clark Phillips has officially replaced Jeff Okudah outside, and I think last week he did have a very good game, so he might draw a tough matchup, whether he's playing some against Olave or some against Shaheed. If Shaheed does play anything outside, maybe it'll be A.T. Perry that he ends up going against, which could be tough because Perry's a big receiver, but Phillips, for a small corner, doesn't have the problems with the big receivers that typically you see, so I'm not too concerned there. Can the Falcons get any turnovers on defense? Because they might need them. Can they slow down the Saints passing game? That's really been their strength. New Orleans on the ground, 31st in yards per carry. They're really struggling there, 21st in total yardage. But in the passing game, they're 16th in net yards per attempt, so about average, 12th in total yardage. So this is a team that likes to pass the ball if they can, and they don't really rely on the run game. So I have confidence in the Falcons' run defense to be able to get things done here. It's really the passing game. Can the Falcons stop the Saints' passing game? This pass defense is kind of hot and cold. They can't get consistent pressure. That makes things difficult. But I'm certainly hoping that this is one week that they can figure out a way to get it done. So we will see how this one goes, obviously. But, a critical game for Arthur Smith more than anything, because I think even if the Falcons win, they're probably not making the playoffs. Of course, the door is open, but we'll probably know by the time this game ends if the Bucs if the Bucs are going to lose to the Panthers. We'll be monitoring it throughout the day on Sunday, I'm sure. But I do think ultimately that if the Falcons don't win this game, it's probably over for Arthur Smith, and the Falcons are looking for a new coach on Black Monday. So, we'll see. I'm definitely not pulling for the team to lose or anything like that. I'm always in favor of beating the Saints. I don't know if this game really does matter or not for Arthur Smith. It may be that the decision's already been made. It may be that it does depend on this game to some extent or not. You guys know my thoughts on it. I'm ready to move on, but let's see what happens this week. Let's see how the team handles it. Let's see if they can go out and sweep the Saints, because that is a big deal for the fan base, for morale, just for good old-fashioned, we need to beat the Saints energy. But I don't know if it's enough, We'll see. It's been a rough season. It's been pretty bad. So, it's always nice to bury the Saints and make sure they don't have a chance to make the postseason. So I hope we can do that at least. And then, of course, we'll have to talk about the future after this game, depending on how this thing goes. But in terms of predictions, I do think the Falcons lose this game. The Saints are a different team at home. They just play a lot better. I think this is a team that is very good at home. They typically always are. And they did play a really good game last week against the Bucs. Again, the Bucs are also inconsistent, so hard to draw too much from that game. But I do really... I just don't like this matchup a lot, especially in New Orleans. It's a place where the Falcons have always struggled to win. It's a place where most teams struggle to win because, again, the Saints are so good at home. So I think the Saints are probably going to win this, 20-17 or something like that. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. But, yeah, I think it's going to be a rough one. And I'm not guessing the Falcons will have quite as much success on the ground. We'll see who plays, whether it's Ritter or Heineke or whoever. It just seems like another quarterback change is just the way we send this season off. But that's our game preview, guys, for this week. Just a heads up that I will be out for this game. My vacation is this week, so there will not be a post game immediately following the game. We will do the post game and sort of the season retrospective type stuff, or the preview for the upcoming playoff matchup, depending on what happens. Probably next Friday. We'll kind of wrap it all up into one mega show, and then we'll, figure out where we're going from there, whether it's draft stuff, whether it's free agency, or whether it is, of course, prepping for a playoff game. So, I certainly wouldn't be upset with the playoffs. I think that's always fun. We haven't had it in many years, but it's very unlikely. But I'm leaving the door open. For it. But guys, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate everyone for sticking with us this season here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. We'll have plenty of off-season stuff coming your way. I'll probably do a mock draft almost immediately. Like I said on Trench Talk earlier, did just book my hotel, book my flight and everything. We're all set for Senior Bowl. I will be there for the entire week of practice, so looking forward to that. Looks like we're going to have some top quarterback prospects there, top edge prospects there. It's going to be a good one this year. Very excited. I'm looking forward to the draft content, looking forward to free agency, and looking forward to seeing what the future direction of this team is at this stage. So thank you guys so much for tuning in to Dirty Birds and Brews. I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you're watching on YouTube, leave that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. And thanks again to BetOnline and Prize Picks for sponsoring today's episode. We will see you guys next week for the final regular season show. Until then, thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the game, hopefully, and we will catch you next time on Dirty Birds and Brews. Have a great night, folks.